Hey folks, this week we chat with Gregory Kurtzer and Krista Burdine about Rocky Linux, its history based in CentOS, where it's been, where it's going, and more. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned. This is FLOSS Weekly, episode 821, recorded Tuesday, February the 11th. Rocky Linux. It's time for FLOSS Weekly. That's the show about free, libre, and open source software. I'm your host, Jonathan Bennett, and we've got a treat today. We've got something really fun. We're going to be talking about CIQ, and that is a technology company that you may better know as the home of Rocky Linux. And we've got Gregory Kurtzer and Miss Krista, whose last name I have forgotten, shame on me. But we've got both of them for the show today, and I am once again flying solo, no co-host today. Definitely need to work on that scheduling issue. We will get that straightened up for our next show, I am sure. But let's not talk about that. We're not here to talk about the FLOSS Weekly scheduling. We're here to talk about the software and the people and the projects. So welcome both to Krista and Gregory. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks. It's great to have you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, Krista.
Actually, I have a quick question for you.
Okay.
The way you framed it in the intro is going to mislead people right off the bat. I'm happy to go with it and then correct it, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to not have it misleading right from the beginning that we have to go back and correct. But it's up to you, however you want to do it. And
go ahead.
As you go to us, we're immediately already in edit mode. I'm sorry.
Edit mode? What are you talking about? This is content. So go ahead. So go ahead and correct it. So, and I say things like that, and I thought of this when I was saying it. I don't know that that's exactly how their structure is set up, but I know that that's the way people are going to think about it. And so this is this is an instance of me saying something dumb on purpose so that you guys get the chance to set the record straight.
I love that. And so I'm going to jump in on this. And Krista, I'm sure you have thoughts on this as well. There is a lot of confusion about what CIQ has done and what Rocky has done and what is the relation between the two. And I love the fact that we're starting this, literally talking about this, because there's been so much confusion on this. So when Rocky first came to be, and this may go a little out of order because maybe we'll come back and talk about this, but when Rocky first came to be, I had a startup called CIQ. And we needed CentOS. Like what we were doing, we required an operating system to be part of the stack that we're creating. Mm-hmm. And so when CentOS went away, it kind of left us in kind of this weird spot where we needed a solution. I raised my hand to the world and said, I'm one of the original co-founders of CentOS, and I'd love to recreate this. Anybody wants to join me? I'm hanging out over in the Slack over here, and come and hang out. And immediately, like so many people joined. Mm-hmm. I think I even put in that original posts that, or the comment to the post where I first announced this, that I'm even willing to hire some people to go help me and do this. So again, if anybody wants to come and join, come into this community. Now, it's really important, I think, to mention that one of the first decisions that CIQ made here was that we don't want to own this. We don't want to control this. This is something that needs to be a community project. It belongs in the community. And so CIQ did not try to own it or control it. As a matter of fact, right from the beginning, this was 100% community. And CIQ did something that I'm actually unaware of any other companies doing. Most companies that operate in open source have a commercial open source or core open source business model, where they have an open source project which they control. Like it's in their GitHub, they control it. Decisions in many cases happen behind closed doors. I don't like running open source projects like that. This is not my first company, and none of my companies have ever done that. So I always try to keep everything as a community project as much as absolutely possible. So Rocky always stayed outside of CIQ, from where it was hosted to how it was hosted to the leadership and the people who were in charge. It was never CIQ and directly controlled or anything like that by CIQ. Now, CIQ was a huge supporter of Rocky Linux. And so there's a lot of confusion there because CIQ has done so much to facilitate Rocky Linux. But I really want to stress this point. CIQ does not own or control Rocky Linux in the slightest. As a matter of fact, there's a huge community behind Rocky Linux that is so much bigger than any single company. That it's bigger than CIQ. It's bigger than any other company, in my opinion, because I love this community and I love what the community is doing. And again, CIQ is here to help, to foster, and to provide assistance as necessary. But we even have like charter bylaws in the charter that says that no single company can ever control the board, and that includes CIQ. So I just wanted to jump in, Jonathan. I apologize for totally like side channeling the podcast.
We had a plan, man. We talked about this. All right, so let's jump back. I appreciate that, because if people only hear one thing, I suppose that's sort of the most important. But let's jump back in history and talk about Greg's, where he comes from, and why you had a passion for community enterprise Linux, and why you were in this place to even be able to respond at all. So what's the backstory? Where do you come from, and why is CentOS something that you have cared about for so many years?
So I've been part of the open source community really since I got super interested in computers. I graduated with a degree in biochemistry, and from there went to work at a bioinformatics company. And this bioinformatics company was using big Unix systems to do a lot of our genomic searches and whatnot. And then the person I was working for said, I think we can do this cheaper and more effectively with this thing called Linux. And this was in the mid-90s, so this was still fairly early. I didn't hear of Linux before that. I thought he was just mispronouncing Unix or was being funny. And but it turns out like there's this really cool thing, Linux. And we actually went to Fry's Electronics, if you remember Fry's way back in the day. And we got a bunch of motherboards, a bunch of processors, memory, and we built up a few kind of well-equipped computers. And we downloaded, I don't even remember what the first version of Linux it was that we downloaded, but we ended up going between Debian and early Red Hat. And we installed it, downloaded it off of, I think it was a 28.8K modem, and installed it via floppy disks onto this hardware. And we created a scientific tool. We created something that I was able to go and do research on, and my colleagues were able to do research on. And it completely boggled my mind, because I've never heard of anything that anything like this was possible, that you can just go and download an operating system or software that is truly valuable without having some sort of tie-in back for making money and having it held over people's head. And you get like a freemium model, like you get a certain amount of things. Like I remember like McAfee antivirus at this point was just starting to get big, and but it was free, but there was a commercial model behind it. There was no commercial model behind this, and it totally intrigued me. So I got super enthralled and interested in Linux and open source, and it became a very, very strong passion of mine, to the point where I kind of gave up my where I focused on my degree, and I kind of transformed it into I want to do Linux, I want to do open source. And I ended up doing a few cool jobs. My first job in Linux was working at a company called LinuxCare, and LinuxCare was one of the three main kind of initial companies in the late 90s doing Linux. There was Red Hat, there was VA Linux, and there was LinuxCare. Red Hat's still around, obviously. VA made a huge amount of noise out there because they blew away all the records for an IPO. And LinuxCare, well, we were on a great trajectory, but we didn't quite make it past that hump. And as a result, a lot of people have kind of forgotten about LinuxCare. There's a lot of really cool stuff. Jonathan, at some point, it'd be a lot of fun to talk about kind of the early days back then and what things were like. But I got even more enthralled with the culture of open source through LinuxCare. I worked with a ton of amazing people in the open source community. Everybody from kernel developers to user space developers to device driver writers, We were part of early LSB, and I worked with some of the people doing LSB. I worked with Andrew Tridgell, Rusty, a whole bunch of amazing people, Chris Yo. And what I learned was that there was so much passion behind open source, and it just completely transformed how I saw the world. I actually, at some point, maybe I'm somewhat embarrassed to say, but I actually thought open source was the way to solve all world problems, because I worked with developers and other people that were in other countries, and in some cases, our government called those hostile nations, but those were people just like everybody else, and we all got to work together, and it was super cool. And so I actually saw it as this is even above politics. This is like we're all just people. We're all working together for the same goals. So I got super interested in it. When you have a background of open source and Linux or an interest in that and a background in science, it's pretty easy to kind of land squarely in high performance computing. Mm-hmm. And I spent a long time working in high performance computing. And in 2000, I ended up leaving Linux Care and going to Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. And in that role, I was immediately kind of put into high performance computing areas, and I created my first open source projects there. My third or fourth open source project was a little operating system called Chaos Linux. Mm-hmm. And the idea of Chaos Linux was it's Debian, but kind of for RPM based. And the idea was I loved RPM. I liked RPM better than Deb, although apt was super cool. And I wish that RPM had a version, something like apt, which did come later, and which was Seth Vidal's work initially with Yum. Mm-hmm. And but I felt like there was this whole part of the ecosystem that was missing, which is this community around the Linux distribution. And so Chaos Linux was designed to be that. And we were building that. We started growing, and this community kept growing. It started off meeting, and if anybody knows Berkeley, started off meeting in Berkeley at a cool little pizza beer joint called Jupiter. And we always used to hang out at Jupiter, and that's where all this started. And from there, again, community kept growing, moved to IRC for most things, and it kept going from there. And over time, the community was quite substantial. We had a number of people that were contributing in and being part of this. And, then Red Hat changed their business model, and they got rid of something called Red Hat Linux. Now, Red Hat Linux up until this point was the free version. It was their we'll call it community version of Red Hat, and Red Hat Enterprise Linux was just kind of getting spun up. So Red Hat Enterprise Linux was, here's what you go pay for if you want commercial, enterprise grade solution support, etc. But the free solution, Red Hat Linux, is just got end of life. And one of the things about Chaos Linux that we were trying to do was trying to maintain core operating system compatibility. And so we're like, well, we want the core APIs to be compatible with Red Hat. So it was a shared common base with Red Hat. So we kind of needed that Red Hat base. And there were a few people on the team that were like, this is not good, but we can still get access to those source RPMs, so we can still get our base and then extend the operating system from there. At about this point, White Box Enterprise Linux came about, and the maintainer of it, I believe his name was John Morris. Don't quote me on that if I got that wrong, John. Sorry. But he put it out there, and he told me in an email thread direct to him that he didn't really want to maintain a whole operating system himself. So I asked if we should work together, and he said no. He says if this is something you're interested in, go ahead and do it. And CentOS was kind of born from that. The first developer on it was a guy named Rocky McGaw, and Rocky was super passionate about open source. He loved open source, and he also came from an HPC background. So him and I, we got along really, really well. And it was a fantastic, kind of initial drive. He worked for a company, an HPC company, that had their own rebuild of Red Hat already. And so he already knew how to do it. We had a couple other people on the team that were just tremendous, fantastic engineers. Michael Jennings is another one of these engineers. And he ran VA's Linux distribution, which again was a rebuild of Red Hat. So we had a number of people on the team who knew exactly how to do this. We had build resources already. So when, Whitebox kind of, hit the market, and then John mentioned he didn't want to do this, we're like, well, let's just throw all the source RPMs through our build system, and we'll just, we'll end up with something that's more community based than Whitebox, but, and maybe something can go bigger. And CentOS was born. Lance Davis came up with the name and brought it to me, and I thought the name was great. A little bit of humor and irony. I said, I don't like the OS being separate than Cent. I said, because Cent is cheap, but it's infinite increase from zero. So I said, CentOS is great. CentOS, I don't like that, but CentOS is great. And of course, we put it towards the community, and the community ended up liking the logos and liking it as CentOS. So whatever. I love that.
That's fun. That's a lot of neat history about how we got to CentOS. And I was around for a little bit of that. My first Linux install was like one of the real early Fedoras, Fedora 3 or 4. So I came onto the scene a little bit after all of this happened. But I found CentOS and, started installing it on some of my machines and on some customer machines too. So I was around for that blog post we talked about before the show. That was in 2020. So it's not been that terribly long ago. But, Red Hat had put out, CentOS 7 was out, CentOS 8 was out, and I thought CentOS 8 was just the coolest thing, so I started installing it on machines, on servers. I had it deployed. And then Red Hat puts this blog post out, and they say, we're not going to continue. Well, okay, so there's a missing step here, right? How did we go from so Red Hat put out this statement that they're not going to continue doing CentOS. How did we get from the point where you and some other open source developers were doing rebuilds of Red Hat's enterprise Linux completely unofficially to Red Hat now has the ability to put the brakes on the project? I think that's an important step that we almost missed there. What happened?
So there was Chaos Linux, which had a similar base as CentOS, and that was the overlap. And then there was CentOS, which kind of had a slightly different trajectory. Mm-hmm. To be clear, my passion was always on making something new initially. Like I wanted to do Chaos Linux. Like Chaos Linux to me was the coolest thing. And while even though people out there wanted CentOS more, I thought it was more fun. I thought it was more interesting to be developing something new from that perspective. So I was really more focused on the Chaos Linux project. I did lead both projects as part of the Chaos Foundation for a few years. Mm-hmm. And there was some history that I'm not going to go into, but it was decided at some point, we came to a mutual agreement that the project should go into separate directions. Mm-hmm. And so CentOS ended up going in one direction. Chaos Linux kept going in another direction. Chaos Linux stayed alive for a number of years after that, but a lot of the interest kind of died out because when the split occurred, CentOS kind of took all of the fame and glory, and for good reason. Like that was what everybody wanted. And so Chaos Linux kind of slowly started dwindling out. Mm-hmm. And the way that, and this is going to come across as a criticism, and I don't mean it to, just in terms of matter of fact, the mm-hmm. way that CentOS was initially kind of instantiated, by no fault of anybody's, just because the technology wasn't there. We had individuals who had the signing keys. We had build hosts, which in some cases were in individual people's homes, mm-hmm. in their garages, in hosting facilities. And we did anything we could. We built the packages anywhere we could. But as a result of that, it's really hard to bring in external people and make them part of this community, because you can't just like hand over the signing keys, which are the keys to the kingdom for the operating system, to somebody who hasn't really been there for a while, and it's hard to kind of open up that envelope of trust. And so we early on, it was a kind of small team, and that team persisted. Now there was a little bit of growth in the team, and a little, some people joined, but for the most part, it was always a very small team that maintained it. As you can probably imagine, especially with a small team, after 10 years of doing this, a number of those engineers, well, they're like, I have my day jobs. I've been spending a lot of time on this in weekends and in evenings and in off hours, and like, this is kind of hard to, have a life and whatnot. So things started to slow down. And a lot of people probably do remember that pre-2014, CentOS was actually starting to slow down. Like, it took, in some cases, 3-4 months for new major releases to come out, and then sometimes even a couple months for point releases to come out. And as a result of that, like, things were just kind of slowing down. So at some point, Red Hat made job offers to a lot of the CentOS maintainers that were still doing this. I was not privy to these discussions. I don't know exactly what happened, but what you can see from the outside is, a number of these engineers and whatnot got employment from Red Hat, and the project moved from the community to Red Hat. I was very optimistic, honestly, when this first happened. I was very hopeful, because I actually felt as though Red Hat is the right home for this initially. For a long time, actually, I thought that. I even proposed to the Red Hat people that I knew, and I think it went up the executive chain at least a little bit at the time, that I actually wanted to hand over CentOS to Red Hat back when I was still running the project. And I wanted to offer it to them. They said no, they didn't want it. Now, granted, that was 10 or 12 years prior to them kind of acquiring the project. Right. But they ended up acquiring it. And that was in 2014, if I remember correctly. And in 2019, IBM acquired Red Hat. And then in 2020, CentOS, we got this announcement. And that's where we merged back up to what you were mentioning just a moment ago.
Yes. Okay. So we get the announcement. Let's continue on from there. We get the announcement, and those of us that had trusted in CentOS, we sort of got burned. Now, if we were on CentOS 7, everything was fine, because that was going to end of life when the end of life was supposed to be. But for CentOS 8, we got basically a year, not even a full year. I think it was several months, like 9 months. It's like, we're going to end of life this in 9 months. And it was, in fact, my wife watches the show, and she made a comment. She says, I remember the reaction in the house to all of that. It was a significant event for a lot of us. And on that blog post from Red Hat, where they made this announcement, you came along and you made a comment. And I don't remember where it got picked up. It may have gotten picked up on Slashdot, or maybe it didn't. Maybe we were just all going to the blog post, and it may be that we were all going to the blog post and going down to the comments and going, surely somebody down here has an idea for what we can do. And there was somebody down in the comments that had an idea for what we could do. What let's see, what possessed you to make an offer like that? And what was the offer? How did that turn out?
Well, so the company that I have is named CIQ, and the goal of CIQ was to build a computing platform. And we were heads down building this computing platform, and we recognize that the computing platform is super complicated. It's actually, especially at the beginning, there's a lot of moving pieces to this computing platform. It's built off of Kubernetes. It's a whole HPC type an AI and ML computing platform that is different than anything else that has existed So it's just super complicated. That's the point. I'm not trying to plug what it is that we were doing, but just super complicated. So when we thought about going to market with this, we recognized that we're going to have to create an entire turnkey stack and support that entire turnkey stack. And obviously, we're like, CentOS is the right solution. And we showed it to some vendors and some partners. And we actually even had a few vendors and partners ask us if we would do this on Ubuntu. And our response was, well, we felt as though that the best and safest solution was CentOS. And so we were moving forward with basing this whole computing stack on CentOS. Well, when we got this announcement, it kind of made us put our foot in our mouth a little bit, as you can probably imagine. So we had to figure out in kind of short order, what are we going to do? Because this affects us, it affects our go-to-market, it affects our customers and partners that we've already been talking to. And to be honest, it affects the whole community, like everybody. Mm-hmm. And so I had some quick discussions with some of my stakeholders at the company. And I said, look, I may need to be part of a project or help to bring this back, because this is a really big piece of the ecosystem and everybody needs this. And so I'm like, I'm going to go raise my hand to the community and say, if anybody wants to do this, I'm going to be hanging over in this Slack. And this Slack just blew up. Like, I don't even know who ended up reposting this. I couldn't keep up with anything at the time. As a matter of fact, I got some people that even got upset at me because I didn't get back to them, because in this Slack, the free tier of Slack supports 10,000 messages in its rolling buffer. If you've got 10,000 plus people in a Slack that all just joined, everybody's talking. I had pages of DMs. I would just scroll and scroll and scroll when I wake up in the morning, go to the bottom one and just see, oh, you can't see this message because it's past 10,000. Go to the next one. You can't see this message past 10,000. And it's not until I get halfway up to the list where I'm basically just kind of catching up to what I can even see. And then I start responding to people. Now, this was a really interesting situation, because going from 0 to 10,000 people, and I'm not joking, it really was over 10,000 people, all talking at the same time, all excited about going and recreating and rebuilding CentOS. Mm-hmm. And managing anything with 10,000 people who just all showed up, like without any management hierarchy, no like structure, like, oh my gosh, that was crazy. Mm-hmm. So first thing that I did was I created a bunch of different channels, and I said, everybody go to the channels in which interest you the most. And so we had people kind of break themselves out into different channels and kind of trickle into different channels. And then each one of these channels kind of had different groups or different initiatives, excuse me. And these initiatives ranged from everything from, okay, let's start mapping out what packages we need. Where are we going to get these packages? How are we going to build these packages? What are the build orders for these packages? Are all of the dependencies present? If not, what dependencies do we have to go? So it was that. Mm-hmm. From what infrastructure do we need to build this? How are we going to manage that infrastructure? How are we going to make sure we don't succumb to the same issues that early CentOS did, mm-hmm. where there just wasn't the capability to even bring in new people from the community? So how are we going to manage that? How are we going to manage the project as a whole? Like, is there a leadership umbrella of this? And then we had people that came along that says, we know nothing about how to build a Linux operating system, but we want to be part. Mm-hmm. And so we had documentation teams all of a sudden joining up. We had a design team who's like, we're artists. Like, we want to make stuff. We want to make stuff pretty. We had a web team that's like, yeah, we want to make a website. So it's actually funny. We had swag and merchandise before having a product, before having an output, because the design team is like, we can do that. Like, we're not going to build an operating system, but we can go build certs, right? Mm-hmm. We can go make this. We can go do something over here, and they did that. And so next thing you know is we have these cool Rocky swags and shirts and stickers. And the first ones actually said Rocky Linux on the shirt, and underneath in bracketed text, early supporters. And I don't even know if they're possible to get anymore, but I always have people asking me, like, can we get an early supporter shirt? It's like,
Yeah, it's fun.
not really an early supporter anymore, but I'll see if I can dig some up. But it's been remarkable, and the team just continued to grow. Now, I want to stress something really important here, which is my knowledge in terms of how to build an open source community is relevant. My knowledge of how to build an operating system is 20 years dated. Like, I haven't built an operating system for 20 years at this point. When these teams started coming together, they immediately outstripped my knowledge of how to actually do this using today's technology, today's capabilities, today's security practices, etc. So I'm watching these teams grow, and I'm like, A, how do I help? B, how do I not get in the way? And how do I just keep everybody in alignment? And that was really my first kind of goal, was just to help build this community, and help build partners and other people who want to be part of this. And CIQ, again, kind of as I mentioned at the beginning, was here to help. CIQ obviously funded me. We ended up, just like I said in the comment to the blog post, that we will hire some people to go do this and to go focus on this. And we did. And we do have people that are hired by CIQ in order to kind of help this community grow and thrive and whatnot. And CIQ does not own or control or hold hostage this community. Like, this community makes its own decisions of what's best for the community. And as a result, this community kept growing and thriving. And others started wanting to join and be part of this. All of the hyperscalers jumped on. Various vendors, ISVs, IHVs joined on. And all these people wanted to be part of this. And it's just beautiful how the whole thing kind of came up to be. And I take credit really for just bringing people together and really just kind of having the vision of, here's how we need to do this at a high level. But I want to stress, like, the people that came together, the teams that came together, are some of the best people in the industry. And Rocky Linux has been amazing. We built everything from scratch, literally. We wouldn't release versions of the operating system unless we knew for a fact that others could also build it. So we've always adhered 100% to open source principles, and everything we've done has been by the community. And I really want to stress that. And that's why I wanted to go back when you first mentioned the cross-pollination between CIQ and Rocky, because I don't want, like, I want to make sure, like, this confusion actually happens all the time. And we are trying our best, both on the CIQ side as well as on the Rocky side, to clarify this. But and I would love advice. Like, if anybody has, like, we're trying to do this now. CIQ definitely is very proud of what CIQ has helped to create. And so sometimes we message, and say things like, the Rocky community is doing fantastic and whatnot. And so people may assume that there's a more of a direct correlation than exists, but they are two separate entities. And CIQ is just here to make sure that open source community continues to grow, thrive, and has whatever it needs to be successful. And there are commercial needs that people have. So a lot of people say we need support, we need optimizations, we need modifications, we need X, Y, or Z. And CIQ does help in a lot of those areas. So when a corporate entity is needed, CIQ raises our hand and we say, we're here to help in any way we can, but you don't need us. Like, go use the operating system without us. Like, we never want to hold it back. So, but if you do need us, we want to win business based on us just trying to be good contributors and good partners with the open source community. And so we try to do very good ethical business on that front. But again, the community has grown, and maybe I've talked enough. I've talked plenty. So probably where Krista starts to come into the
I was thinking about that. And so the organization that is not CIQ, that sort of is the host for Rocky Linux then, is RESF. And I think this is a perfect time to kick it over to Krista and ask, what is RESF and what is it all about?
Thank you. Hi. The RSF is the Rocky Enterprise Software Foundation. And the whole point of its existence is probably to inspire both individuals and corporations to be able to come together in support of a common goal, which is that of preserving the longevity and the stewardship, and also of enterprise type software, and also of helping to drive innovation in that piece of open source.
Mm-hmm. And so what's your backstory, Krista? How did you get involved in all of this? Were you one of the early adopters that saw the blog posts and just couldn't get away from it? Or, where do those threads tie in?
I traveled my own path.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of stumbled into the Rocky Linux project. In retrospect, I feel like it was the beginning of chapter 2 of Rocky's birth and getting going, because they had worked so hard to just get the product up and get stable with that. And I think they were starting to realize, we need to pay attention to the community part of this open source community, technical community.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing that, I didn't even know what was coming. I had just, in my own world, had been trying to develop my skills in technical writing. And I knew that open source documentation was a way to do that. So I joined this new project. I knew somebody who was involved with it, and they pointed out that with open source documentation, anybody can be contributing to it, but also it's a new project. So this is a great time to be involved, because we're in the process of creating a whole lot of documentation, unlike some projects that may be 20 years old by now, are a little more, less, volatile, that's the wrong word, but they're not changing as much.
Sure.
So I just came in to develop my technical writing chops. And after a few months of that, somebody reached out and said, "Hey, would you have any interest in participating in the community?" And I said, "Well, what's involved?" And they said, "Well, we have a couple social media accounts, and sometimes we go to events." So I said, "Okay, yeah, I could do that." I don't have a job right now.
That works out nicely.
Yeah, I have time to do that.
Yes.
And it very quickly turned into something much bigger than that, because it was right as the original board was forming, as far as the oversight committees. They had just really gotten the RESF formalized and ready to be inhabited. So I got to be a part of voting in the first board, which was the very first thing I did as an official Rocky Enterprise Software Foundation member. So I think of myself as the first one who joined after the beginning, which is what makes me part of the beginning of chapter 2.
Yep. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And so what does the community itself look like these days? If you were to give someone a quick primer on, tell me about the community involved with Rocky Linux. What does it look like?
Well, I have attended a lot of events, and in so doing, I've had to learn how to articulate the project. And it helped us all to acknowledge and realize we have really two separate sides of the project that we like to think everybody all works together as a whole. And we're all pretty, I feel like we regard ourselves pretty laterally. It's not a lot of hierarchy, but it's a team of leaders that each has their eyes on a different part of the project. And we realize that there's a side that's more technical, such as the release engineering and the testing team and the infrastructure side. And then there's the side that is more non-code based, but also important and valuable, which is the design team, the web team, the documentation, and the community itself. And so my eyes are pretty much on the community side and on those non-technical, or it's not non-technical, but it's non-code. On that non-code side, that I try to include everybody, to communicate with everybody. I came in and started with people and tried to create points of connection, because I knew I may not know open source that well, and I may not know all of this technical code stuff, but I know people. And I know that when people feel connected to a thing, they come back, they hang around, and when you give them ownership of a thing, they get involved. And then they also, when they have ownership, then they in turn pass on that enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So I would say that our community now is something that's more engaged and is also there and feeling like this is a thing that's fun, and this is our social group.
So one of the things that we often ask about, kind of at this point in the show, is like who sets the roadmap, and the idea there is we're kind of asking like, is the project community driven versus top down driven, and that's sort of maybe a category error question here, because in some ways Red Hat sets the roadmap, right? Because the Rocky Linux is a repackaging of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and so I'm just curious, like how much roadmap is there? How much wiggle room do you guys take for yourselves?
Well, I think I'll answer from my perspective, and then maybe Greg has more to say. But I know that our group looks ahead as much as they can, as far as they can, and tries to be prepared for the changes that come. The new releases of Red Hat, of RHEL, don't come in a vacuum. They come out of incubation and out of testing from other projects, the Fedora and what's now CentOS Stream, which is what the CentOS project became, which we haven't really addressed yet. It didn't just go away. It became a new thing. And it is now upstream, and it is still generating what is today that we know as Enterprise Linux. So, got lost on the question, but what they're looking, the people in our group in Rocky Linux are looking upstream to see what changes are coming and already putting together test versions of future releases just to make sure that they're prepared. I know that the primary function, the primary purpose of Rocky Linux is to exist in the space that it exists in, and to meet the needs of the demographic that has flocked to it for those reasons.
Hey, Greg, same question.
As far as sorry.
No, go ahead,
and then I can.
Okay.
Well, as far as the community goes, our purpose of existing now is to just continue, or as far as our roadmap is to look down the road at what can help us be successful long term at supporting the community. So, we try to make sure that we have support from a diversity of sources. We try to make sure that we have everything documented so that to insulate ourselves in case somebody has to go away, then there's somebody else can come in and take over their role or solve the problems that have been solved. And so we set a roadmap in that way of trying to just articulate what we are and where we want to go.
Very good. Okay, so same question, but this is going to go, I'm sure, a very different direction, because we're going to go to Greg and talk about roadmap. And again, it seems that there's maybe not a lot of wiggle room, and at some point we're going to have to make comparisons between Rocky Linux and Alma Linux, right? They're the other big player sort of in this space outside of Red Hat, and so what. We'll dive more into this. I know part of the answer here, but like, what does your roadmap look like, and how much is that set by upstream Red Hat?
A lot of the roadmap, of course, is set by upstream Red Hat.
Yeah.
When we started this, the whole point was to continue where CentOS has left off, and I want to actually go back to Krista's point. CentOS Linux has left off because CentOS Stream does exist, and that's what CentOS has become, which is now in front of Red Hat. So I'll differentiate that more pedantically, and usually I'm pretty lax about that, but I will be more pedantic. So CentOS Linux left off, and Rocky was there to take its place, in a matter of speaking, and to become the successor of CentOS Linux. Now, to do that means that we have a set of goals that we need to adhere to, which originally CentOS Linux adhered to, and our mission, our vision for the product is how do we continue with exactly where that left off. So when we think of roadmap, a lot of it is how do we ensure that we can always do this? And how do we ensure that we can always, fulfill the promise that we made to the community that we set out to do, at least to the best of our ability? And we've seen some difficulties. There's been some changes with regards to access to source code, just as an example. And Rocky and RESF said, we're going to stick to our guns. We're going to stick to the promise that we made because we don't want to make any changes to all of the people that are running Rocky Linux. They entrusted us with their infrastructure. So we are going to continue with exactly with what we said we're going to do and what we set out to do until the point where, if it ever comes, that we cannot. And so that's our goal. That's our mission. That's our strategy. And to some extent, that's our roadmap. But then the roadmap becomes a little bit more strategic. How do we ensure that we can continue to do this? So when source code kind of dried up a little bit, and it became more difficult to get access to the source code, Rocky came up with a number of different ways to do this and to continue building the operating system. But at the same token, I'm all I've been burnt with failed missions many times in the past, so I'm always thinking about contingencies and what do we do for contingency planning, and how do we ensure that everything that we're doing is going to be able to continue moving forward. So I reached out to Oracle and I reached out to SUSE, and I said, look, we're kind of all in the same sort of boat. Like, how do we all ensure that the source code for enterprise Linux always remains open and we all can get it, we all can leverage it? And Oracle said, yeah, this is something we would love to be part of. And SUSE said, we'd love to be part of this. And an open ELA was created. Now, to be clear, Rocky already had a solution for moving forward. So Rocky is continuing to use that solution. So nothing has changed on the Rocky side. But the fact that now open ELA exists provides a contingency plan for Rocky and ensures that Rocky will always exist and will always be able to continue moving forward. And that is backed by not only CIQ, but Oracle and SUSE. We actually are opening up membership. That's actually becoming a 501c6 nonprofit. And we're opening up membership right now. And we actually have, I believe it's 2 other organizations who are proposing membership right now and looking to do that. So the open ELA is also growing, and that's going to provide greater stability in what I'm jokingly going to call the land of enterprise Linux, which is this pseudo standard of what does it mean to create an operating system that is compatible with other operating systems, which makes life better for system administrators, for end users, for IHVs, ISVs, other partners as well. Everybody really wants compatibility across the spectrum. So we have this pseudo standard, which is today to follow Red Hat's lead. But again, this whole thing is about making sure we have contingencies and making sure that we are properly set up, that no matter what fluctuates within corporate agendas, that Rocky Linux can continue and that we can continue doing exactly what we set out to do. Now, you brought up Alma. I'll address this initially. Krista may have some thoughts on this as well. But when the source code kind of became more difficult to obtain, Alma Linux took a different trajectory, slightly different trajectory. Their trajectory was, well, we don't have to be exactly one-to-one compatible. We can be close, but not exact. And they de-risked Alma Linux in the sense that it doesn't have to be exact. It just needs to be close. And they've done a very good job at keeping it close. And they've done a really good job also on adding additional features and capabilities that people want that Red Hat doesn't do.
Like backporting some pretty important security fixes earlier than Red Hat does. That's one of them. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So there is there's a great opportunity now for Alma There's a great opportunity for Rocky Linux. And the most important thing that now we have in this ecosystem of enterprise Linux is choice. And now we have, so Oracle Linux also is not identical. It's really dang close, but it's not identical. And but we now have choice, and people can choose what operating system fits their needs and requirements best. And this is, but we still have compatibility, which is exactly kind of where we need to be. Again, to solve problems for our users, to solve problems for our partners and vendors. Like, we need that compatibility. Otherwise, we end up with Linux distributions that aren't compatible with each other. And while there could be some benefit to that in the sense that, you know, people could do different things with their Linux distributions, when you're talking about professional IT staff, whether it's their jobs to maintain a fairly significantly, you know, large infrastructure, and they don't want surprises. They want to sleep at night. They want to know everything's exactly the same, right? And so they want that, like, boringness, super boringness. And some Linux distributions are going to be bleeding edge. They're going to be moving faster. They're going to be focused on different areas. In enterprise Linux, it's I hate to put it this way, but it's kind of about the boring. And how do we help system administrators and IT professionals and partners and whatnot bring value and maintain their infrastructure in a way that, you know, helps them sleep at night.
Yeah. So I commented at the time when both Rocky and Alma Linux both were announced to become things. There were some people that went, well, why do we need two of these? And I at the time said, well, these are going to be run by different people. At some point, there's going to be different decisions made. And I thought from the very beginning that it was a great thing to have both projects in the space. From a one perspective, sort of as an insurance policy, but from the other perspective also just because they are eventually going to go in slightly different directions and they're going to meet different needs. So I am, and I've said this publicly, I am thrilled that both Rocky Linux and Alma Linux exist, and I think they're both super important.
I was on a podcast with Igor, who was the original founder of Alma Linux, with Cloud Linux. And I was on a podcast with him, and somebody asked us at some point, shouldn't we just join forces? And there's some good reasons to join forces, but both Igor and I agreed at the time that, you know, really what the community needs, especially after one whole operating system was just end of lifed unilaterally, for the most part, right? Really, what everybody needs is. They need to know that there's multiple solutions out there. They need to know that they have safety in numbers, in a matter of speaking. And it's very good that there are multiple solutions out there. And it's even better that we're all compatible.
Yeah.
That's the key in my mind. The moment that somebody has to deal with an incompatibility between operating systems, between infrastructure tooling, or whatever, that actually makes life harder on people. Having standards actually makes life better, makes life easier. So even though right now it's a pseudo standard, this is something that we do have kind of like a goal. We have this golden image of what we're trying to emulate. And I think Alma, I think Rocky, I think Oracle, I think SUSE Liberty, and others out there are doing a fantastic job maintaining that compatibility. And this is, by the way, OpenELA does more than just distribute the source code and ensure that it's always available. OpenELA is also now talking about, well, how do we help guarantee compatibility across all of these different variants? And how do we demonstrate compatibility across all these different variants such that we encourage variants to some extent? And at the same token, we're also encouraging stability and compatibility between those variants. Because again, at the end of the day, for end users, for the people that are using this, the people that are relying on this, there's safety in numbers. So let's make sure that we've got backup plans, we've got contingencies, and everybody knows that the enterprise Linux ecosystem is, as a result, the most stable ecosystem in Linux. That you can go and run any of these operating systems and end up in a great place.
Have there been conversations with Alma Linux about joining OpenELA?
I have not.
Okay.
I can't say if there have been other conversations about it. I know that there have been questions that just, again, not with the not with the Alma people and team, but just questions on, where are they going to end up getting source code once CentOS Stream end of life? Because they're only, CentOS Stream is only alive for 5 years. So where are they going to end up getting updates from and whatnot? And I make the invitation that OpenELA is there. Like, if they want to use OpenELA, absolutely, we would love it, and we think that would be terrific.
Yeah, it occurs to people. It occurs to me, like, you guys are doing similar things. It just, there's obvious room for collaboration, even if, as we said, it doesn't make sense to try to merge the projects, right? We don't want that. But there's all kinds of room for collaboration between the two, and with the others in the space. So that's a question you'll probably get as long as there are both projects out there. All right, so let's. One other thing I wanted to touch on, and maybe this is just going to be commentary from me, although I'm sure you'll have something to add to it. Red Hat, do not, for those of you listening, do not think that we are bashing on Red Hat. Do not think that Red Hat are the bad guys, particularly the Red Hat engineers that are actually doing the work. There are some excellent engineers there, some really good people. I guess I shouldn't. Well, no, I'll say we, because I do as well. We have a difference of opinion on what we think of their business model, and particularly the fact that they end-of-lifed the CentOS when there were some commitments already out in the wild to not do so. But don't go harass your local Red Hat employee. Have you seen some of that? I've seen a few threads from people at Red Hat. Like, please don't. It's not our fault. There's more to the story, what have you. There were different threads about it. I'm sure that's been on your radar too.
So you bring up something that actually I think is super important for us to address. And again, I think Krista may have some thoughts on this. But, a lot of people have their sports teams, and they're super excited about their sports teams. Like, I've seen fights emerge. I used to love to go to hockey games, and oh my goodness, the fights in the stands and whatnot. Like, like, people have their religions associated with things that they love. And the tech industry, especially the Linux industry and community, we've got a lot of our own religions, in a matter of speaking. Sure. And whether it's what editor you're using, what programming language you're using, what IDE or Linux distribution or window manager, like, we all have like passion on what it is that we are excited about, and we kind of defend those like other people would defend their sports teams in many cases.
Yes.
My point is, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of excitement, and there's a lot of emotion that has occurred over the last few years. There's been a lot of emotion, both around Red Hat, around Rocky, around Alma, around all of this. A lot of times, this unfolds in different ways. But I'm glad to say that at this point, I think most of that drama and that rockiness, not to use that pun purposely, but has actually kind of gone by at this point. And I don't see very much of it anymore, which I'm really thankful for. I've made mistakes. Other people, I think, I'm not going to call anyone out, but I think there's been a lot of mistakes made in terms of how we allowed our emotion and our personal feelings and whatnot to get involved with this. And the good news is, I think we're in a fundamentally better place from an enterprise Linux perspective than we ever have been before. Meaning, even when CentOS was separate from Red Hat, it was still, except for the very beginning, we actually had multiple different types of versions of CentOS. There was Tau Linux, and there was Whitebox, and there was others, but it all kind of merged into CentOS, which now meant there was one kind of operating system. And we saw how that kind of ground down, just slowed down for a while and whatnot. But it was just really one. I believe we're actually in a fundamentally better place.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we had to go through some drama and we had to go through some emotions to get to this place, but I think we're in a great place right now. And I think it's good for, to be honest, I think it's good for Red Hat. I think it's good for the users. I think it's good for vendors. I think it's good for everybody. So I fundamentally believe we're in a better place. Krista, did you have any thoughts? I wanted to kind of poke
Yes, I wanted to ask
bit.
Krista too, because she works as the community manager, and a lot of times the community manager is the front line on dealing with some of those passions in the community. Is that something that you see?
I think it has diminished a lot since I first started working with the project. What we've tried to frame it as, and to ourselves as much as externally sometimes, is to remind ourselves and to remind anybody who wants to say, why aren't you guys fighting like you're in a hockey match? Is that Enterprise Linux is really a neighborhood. It is its own little branch of Linux, of the greater world of Linux. And I think it helps the entire Enterprise Linux ecosystem if we work together and consider ourselves co-laborers instead of enemies within. Because nobody's going to say, I'm going to go to Rocky versus Alma. They're going to say, oh, there's too much drama here. I'm going to Debian, which, Debian is its own thing. But for people for whom Enterprise Linux is a good solution, it's best for us to all work together for the good of Enterprise Linux in general, in order to continue to allow that whole platform to move forward. To that end, what we've done is we support the Fedora and CentOS stream. We consider that our upstream. And so we actually contribute financially to their gathering conferences, and we go and attend and participate together. And Alma Linux people are there, and we all sort of just mingle together. And we are at least friendly to each other.
Well, that's good. That's better than any of the alternatives.
Right? I mean, you might as well be able to get along with the people that you're at events with.
Yes. Okay, so we talked a little bit about roadmap in sort of a theoretical idea, but is there anything sort of on the horizon that you guys know is coming that you want to plug? And any big plans to announce?
10 is coming. Risk 5 is coming. So those are the big pieces of what we're excited about. I can also share that for our users that are leveraging government compliance needs and whatnot, FIPS is finally on its way. Now, we've been pushing on FIPS. So CIQ has funded the FIPS development for Rocky for quite some time. We promised to the user base that we would start with version 8. And the problem is that, and not to get too far in the compliance world, but FIPS is really hard. Like, there's a lot of difficulty with managing and navigating the whole FIPS ecosystem and process, and couple that with 140-2 just end of life as this whole thing was spinning up. And 140-3 is the new standard for FIPS operating system module compliance. And version 8 was never built for 140-3. It was built for 140-2. And so CIQ, it took us a long time and a ton of development to actually get version 8 140-3 compliant. And as of right now, all of the modules are in MIP status, and they are available. And CIQ is making all of that available back to the community as well. For someone that heard FIPS and is thinking of Simon Phipps, what is FIPS compliance? So FIPS is a compliance that guarantees the cryptography is running properly within the operating system, and it is meeting the government standards defined by 140-3. So there's a whole bunch of cryptography that occurs within the operating system and occurs within applications. What this is stating is that there are various components of the operating system that are providing cryptography, and each one of those is functioning and certified that it is working properly and it is validated and approved by the government.
Mhm.
So it's taken some time to get to that point. Anybody who has to deal with federal compliance is dealing with FIPS, and it is a big deal.
Yeah.
And this is why it has been a many multi-million-dollar investment from CIQ to do this, and so that's going to be released here shortly as well. So we're going to see FIPS, and again, just to reiterate, version 10 is coming. I believe the guesses of when that's going to come out is in summer, and we have been working on RISC-V for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
So RISC-V is also on its way.
Yeah, interesting. I am personally, I'm fairly excited about RISC-V as a thing as it moves into the Linux ecosystem.
Absolutely.
I'm
Totally
looking
agree.
forward to some even better hardware being available for some less ridiculous prices. There's some good out there, but I feel like we're ready for the next really good one to come out. All right, let's see. So, is there any talk within either CIQ or Rocky about doing something like a repackage of CentOS Stream or a repackage of Fedora or anything crazy like that, or does that just not make any sense to you guys?
From my perspective, I haven't heard much rumblings at all through the community on that.
Mhm.
I know that there's a lot of our community members, even our developers, that run and leverage Fedora, quite a bit.
Yeah.
Fedora is a fantastic collaborative operating system, and it has definitely been extraordinarily valuable area of the enterprise Linux ecosystem, but it is kind of the bleeding edge area of the enterprise Linux ecosystem. On the CentOS Stream side, this is a little bit more where I don't want to put words in Alma's from their perspective, but this is a little bit more where Alma's kind of focusing right now. So Alma's a little bit more on the CentOS Stream side, and then guaranteeing that compatibility, and then adding some additional value, which again, totally fantastic. I love that they're doing that. Yeah. From the Rocky perspective, we're really just focused on being that the successor of CentOS, and to continue moving forward, just to make sure that everybody has very clear understanding of what CentOS Linux was, and now what Rocky is.
Do you guys have line of communication with like the Red Hat engineers? So, and the reason I ask this is because I know that you, like all of the rest of us, when you spend much time with an operating system, you find problems, you find bugs, and you guys are in an interesting position to find those, figure out the fixes, and maybe get them pushed upstream. You're also because of the bug for bug compatibility, you're in an interesting place where you may know what the fix is, but you don't want to roll that fix out until Red Hat does. So is there, and I'm sure there must be some work where you're trying to push things back upstream to Red Hat. Please fix this. Please pull this patch into your sources. What does that process look like?
So our release engineering team has actually had a number of tickets in with Red Hat to either fix certain things or to provide feedback on certain things. I can tell you it is a difficult situation that, and I'll say this kind of bluntly, and again, I don't mean it in a negative way, but all of the enterprise Linux ecosystem is following the lead of Red Hat. And so as a result of that, it is not really community and collaborative. Yes, there's some opportunity to provide some collaboration back into Red Hat, but it is not really an open collaborative community. So it makes it difficult for us. I would love to invite Red Hat to be more open with that, but I'm not complaining. I think what we have right now is, I think, fantastic, and I think we're working through it in a very good way. With that being said, this is also provided difficulty. And again, this is not about plugging CIQ, but to kind of talk about a difficulty is we have customer contracts where we are providing additional value on top of what currently exists. In some cases, that's optimization. In some cases, that's hardening. In some cases, that's performance tuning, etc.
Mhm.
And there are some times in which CIQ decides, well, we need to go fix a security bug that Red Hat has decided that they don't want to fix, or something just happened recently, and I can get you the details. I don't have them off the top of my head, where CIQ actually just pushed back on a CVE, and we just got a CVE unvalidated,
Mhm.
meaning it's not truly a CVE. So
That's quite the process to do, too.
yeah. So we did that, and that affected Red Hat in a positive way as well, because Red Hat wasn't fixing it. So we actually got that CVE nixed. So, Nix is an operating system, a Linux variant. So I shouldn't use that. A very cool one, by the way, I may add. So we were talking about kind of value-add operating systems.
Yeah.
Nix is super cool.
Oh yeah, there's some clever ones out there.
So it has been a little bit of a challenge for CIQ. We have additional repositories for our customers that when we fix things that are either not fixed upstream yet and whatnot, we fix it there. And in cases where we can, we do push it back up to the upstream communities. In some cases, that could be Red Hat Fedora. In some cases, it's Stream. In some cases, it's the upstream project itself. We have a lot of customers, for example, that are leveraging the upstream stable kernel. So we tend to work very closely also with the upstream stable kernel team, because we're seeing performance and security enhancements on that front as well.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of an interesting way to consider the enterprise Linux ecosystem, because you still get that completely compatible user space. So all your applications work, everything works as expected, but you're also now getting, a better hardware support. In some cases, again, better performance, and in some cases, many times better security coverage by using the upstream stable kernel. So we've kind of played and dabbled with that for some of our big customers.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are at the end of our time, but I did want to ask each of you, give the opportunity. Is there anything that I didn't ask about, that we didn't cover, that you want to make sure and get in? And let's let Krista go first, actually. Was there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to let folks know about?
Well, I just want to say, I think one of the things that makes our community stand out is that we try to really engage with the people in the community. We like to say with the different enterprise Linux distributions to choose the one that fits you the best. For us, I think some of the things that help us stand out are the community and the documentation, and our group of special interest groups. They're SIGs they are the groups that provide the things that are in addition to what Rocky Linux is, such as when we do security fixes that need to be done before they're fixed upstream. They can be found there, so people can add those for additional hardening. We love our documentation tree, and then with our community, what I've been thinking about was the fact that there are several things that motivate people to engage in open source community. And that can be anything from financial to psychological, like as far as well-being is concerned. It can be social, it can be educational, which is what brought me in, and it can be just for the chance to contribute freely to something on your own terms. So as a community, the way I'm trying to grow it is by acknowledging that those are all ways that people can get something from our community, and to address them in the ways that we can, so that as many people as possible, when they come to our community, they give themselves what they have to give, and then that they give something in return. So that is my great goal for our community as the way to make it stand out.
Yeah, very good. And anything else that we didn't talk about that you guys wanted to cover?
I'll throw something out there.
Sure.
So before Rocky was created, and it was literally like a month or two, I think, before December of 2020, I was having a conversation with some of my friends that are, in open source and whatnot. And we were kind of talking about, comparing the shades of gray in our beards, and talking about kind of what things were like, in early open source, and how amazing it was that an engineer, a contributor, could make such a profound impact to the world. And it kind of, we reflected that it seemed a little sad that it kind of felt like that wasn't going to happen ever again. And the people that had that opportunity, again, generations of graybeards, in a matter of speaking, and we people that are newer to the field may not ever see something like that, and then almost like serendipity, magic, Rocky happened.
Mm-hmm.
And Rocky has been so influential to so many people in terms of what it does. To Krista's point, it is a social gathering place. It is a collaboration. It is a place where people who have never actually even maybe even just joining the field of technology or don't have kind of this long pedigree, contributing in open source is a tremendous thing to put on your resume. It's a tremendous amount of experience that you can put under your belt. And again, I mean, Krista nailed this. Like, anyone can go do this, and you can do it on your time. So I want to stress whether somebody decides to join Rocky or they decide to join another open source project, get involved with open source. It really is truly special, and choose what community you want to be part of. And I also want to say that you don't have to be a software engineer, a software developer, to bring value to an open source project. Now,
Absolutely.
Younger projects, sometimes, it's probably a little bit more on the technical side, but especially as the project starts to grow, they need every single role that you can imagine, from documentation to marketing to even sales. Like, in some cases, many projects need donations. Like, it is a very different personality from an engineer to a salesperson for somebody who's going to go and be successful in helping to gather funds for an open source project. There is governance, there is leadership, there is management, there is program management, project management. There's even like everything you can imagine. Like come and join. If you have an interest in being part of some of this, I just want to encourage people that you may not be a traditional kind of engineer, software developer. There's value you can bring to an open source community. And I can tell you, if you decide that you want to check out Rocky, please do. Our community is wonderful. It's very welcoming. Krista runs this because she's much friendlier than I am. And everybody likes Krista more than me. So Krista runs this, and reach out. Like, come join our Mattermost at chat.rockylinux.org. And come join in. You'll see Krista there. You'll see me there. You'll see everybody there. And it's a fun place to hang out. It's a fun place to talk. And there's a lot of really cool things that are happening there. So come join.
Yeah, very cool. All right, final questions for each of you. And, the final question is, and we'll start with Krista, favorite text editor and scripting language. And I know sometimes for the community people that question doesn't mean quite the same as it does to the engineer types, but all the same.
My favorite scripting language is in English.
It's fair. A text editor?
I use Windows.
That's fine. like I said,
I would love to be more technical than I am, and I would love to sound more technical than I just did. But yeah.
That's perfect.
I use commonly available tools. That's
perfectly fine. Like I said, we get it's obviously a set of questions that are very much geared towards developers, and when we get people that are from either the business side of things or the community side of things, it's sort of a mismatch of the questions. But at the same time, it's fun. So, hey, Greg, same two questions.
So they're related for me. For almost all of my programming career, I used Vim. And leverage Vim. I still think in Vim, even when I'm in a Google Doc, I think in Vim. So you'll see lots of random I's, A's, and colon W's all over my docs. With that being said, going to the next question again, which is related, I've coded a lot historically, and you can make fun of me, in Perl and in the past. And I prefer C as my primary programming language. But within the last 4 years through a container system that I created called Singularity, and I moved it to Linux Foundation. It's now called Aptainer. That's now in Go. I recoded a cluster provisioning system called Werewolf that I've been running since 2001. I recoded that in Go. And when I did that, I decided to use an IDE because picking up a new language with an IDE is much easier. And so I chose VS Code for that. So my text editor of choice is still Vim, but when I'm coding nowadays, I end up in VS Code more often than not. And Go is both a programming language as well as a scripting language for me.
Someone needs to come up with a browser extension to give us evil mode for Google Docs. Doesn't that sound like fun? Somebody out there listening, let's get on that.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. All right. Gregory and Krista, thank you both so much for being here. It's been a blast getting to talk about Rocky Linux and CIQ and the Rocky Software Foundation and the community there. Thank you both so much for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And boy, that was a great conversation. Really, really enjoyed that. And love the comparison and contrast with Alma Linux and just that agreement that we're all happy that both of them are there, and I think that's a neat story out of this. So next week, we've actually got something really cool, and it's going to be 2 weeks from when we record today, but if you watch this on the download after it's edited, it'll just be a week away. We're talking with Simon Shockham about NAND to Tetris. That is an open source bit of courseware where you start with the most basic building block, the NAND gate, and you work through building an ALU and a CPU and then writing assembly code for that and building a very simple compiler all the way up to running Tetris on this computer that as a student you build from scratch. And the whole thing is open source, and I think it's one of the most fun courses out there, and I asked Simon about it, and he's willing to come on and talk about it on the show. So that is the plan. We record that on the 25th, and it'll go live on the 26th, and so we hope to see everybody there. We appreciate everybody that watches and listens, both live and on the download, and we will see you all next week on FLOSS Weekly.